So this huddle is being recorded. So by speaking, you're going to give consent to Verus Global to record your image and video. All right, now I'm going to go turn it over to our host, Craig Ross.
Thank you, Sherilyn, and hello, everyone. Our big question that we're going to be addressing in our huddle: how do you create an aligned and connected team while operating virtually through a crisis? Welcome to our very first Collaborative Leaders Huddle. Of course, hosted by Verus Global, where we believe that organizations that are not aligned fail their customers, they fail their employees, and of course, by connecting teammates to purpose, one another, and values is the fastest way to succeed. I'm psyched that you're joining us today. This is an unprecedented moment, the crisis that we're facing. All of us are challenged because we're having to do business separated from one another. We're facing an economy that is certainly taking a devastating hit. And collectively, as an entire world, who we are as people is being challenged. Our values will be tested and revealed in this moment. That's why we're doing this. This is why we are launching the Collaborative Leaders Huddle, because we at Verus Global have this opportunity to have these one-on-one discussions with inspired leaders like so many of you. And we thought that's a shame. We should bring everyone together so that we can together identify some ideas, some ways from our shared values in order to, of course, better connect people to our purpose in this moment, to one another and our shared values. In this 50 minutes, it's going to be raw. It's, as you can probably tell already, it's unscripted. There's been no dress rehearsal. This is what we wanted to do. We didn't want to bring yet another webinar to the market. We wanted to be real with real people. And so thank you for joining. I've got a special co-host. My co-host today is Kyle Shelley. He's our Senior Partner Advisor at Verus Global. If you haven't met Kyle, I want you to know one thing about Kyle. He believes that connecting people requires us to be authentic human beings. Kyle, say hello.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. It's going to be a very fun next 45 minutes and really hitting on the point that Craig just drove home. Unscripted for a reason, because life isn't scripted. And we really do believe that even though that it seems like business has stopped, leadership and culture can't. We can't stop being great leaders. We can't stop being able to know how to address these things and be there for the people that are looking to us for leadership. And that's where the collaborative leadership really comes into play. So very excited that you all are joining us this morning.
Awesome. Bam. Thank you, Kyle Shelley. And now our special guest. For most of you, she needs no introduction. Dr. Angie Piccioni, the one and only Dr. Angie Piccioni. You can sense my smile and my energy and my enthusiasm. It would take an entire day to cover the accomplishments and the influence Angie Piccioni has had on the countless lives around the world. Currently, Dr. Angie Piccioni serves as the Executive Director for Higher Education in the state of Colorado. She sits on Governor Jared Polis's cabinet. Among her many highlights in her career is the 12 years, of course, that she spent side by side with all of us at Verus Global and serving so many of you, traveling the world in programs like Pathways to Leadership and so forth. She currently also serves as an advisor to Verus Global. I'm honored to have co-authored 2 books with Angie Piccioni, One Team, Do Big Things. And most importantly to me, I'm just truly honored and humbled to call Angie a friend. Angie, say hello.
Well, hello everyone, and geez, Greg, you're making me get all misty-eyed on all of those kind words. So great to see some familiar faces in the array here, and happy to be your first guest in your collaborative huddle.
Terrific. Angie, we're going to jump right in. We promised everyone value. We promised everyone a rigorous discussion where we could get inspiration and practical tools, things that we can do to answer our big question. Our big question is, during this time of crisis, how do we align teams? How do we connect our teammates, especially in a remote setting? Let's jump in. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have to say that when you shared with me that question, I thought just the first half of that question, how do you create an aligned and connected team, would have been enough as a big question for today. But when you added as well virtually and through a crisis, that certainly made it a bigger question, if you may. And so when you think about how you create an aligned team, the alignment has to be around what the objectives are, what the mission is of the organization, whether it's a business or public service. And so for me, I find what I've used now, and folks from P&G that are on there, you'll recognize this. And we have our OGSMs, our objectives, goals, and strategies and measures. And so that has been a framework that really has helped individuals who are working from home to be focused and be aligned on what it is that they have to deliver for the Department of Higher Education. When you think about a connected team, that connected team, we connect on our values and we connect on the fact that we care about each other. And so when I was a school teacher years and years ago, one of the first things my mentor teacher told me was, these students will not care as how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that has carried through all of my profession and all through my career. And so making sure that we already build on the foundation that we care about each other. That's not something you can do in a crisis. That's something that has to be built over time. And so alignment, yes, you have your goals and your deliverables. Connection, you've got to care, and that's got to be part of your culture. You have to have that already established, that you care about each other. And then doing it virtually and through a crisis is this, it's communication. And what I have found in these last few months of dealing with this crisis, we have over 400 institutions of higher education in Colorado. And so over communicating really helps. So we have morning meetings, we have standing meetings with the presidents of our public institutions of higher education. And so over communicating, I think, is a way to do all of that through a crisis. So I would go with those three.
Terrific. All right. Thank you, Angie. I got a follow up. I want to drill down on this idea of over communicating. I'm technically an introvert. And so in a day-to-day situation, I can come into the meeting and it's business as usual. I just show up and I wait for the agenda to unfold. It's been my belief, though, and especially given the work that we're doing with connecting people to purpose one another and of course our values, that in a virtual setting, we actually have to be super deliberate on being clear about the objectives, super deliberate on perhaps, here comes my introvert part, getting out of my comfort zone and actually having discussions that we don't typically have when we can be face to face. I'd like your thoughts on that, and then I'll come to you, Kyle.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And even adding some structure. So even something like this right now, of course, we're asking all of you to put your comments and your questions in the chat, but sometimes we'll have almost this many people on a call. And so how do you structure the communication? How do you make sure that people know ahead of time, what is the purpose of this meeting? What are the key objectives that we want to accomplish in this meeting? Who's going to be speaking in this meeting? And really recently I had a call with one of our US senators from Colorado and about 30 presidents of our institutions. And so we did, the framework of, it's a 2-minute drill. You've got 2 minutes to share your top 2 issues with the senator. And I will say who's up and who's on deck. And if you're on deck, make sure you unmute and you're ready to go. And so we have who's up and who's on deck, and then we just cycle through, and it worked out perfectly. And so when you communicate, how you communicate, the structure, so it gives people some confidence that they're going to be able to be heard and we're able to move the mission forward.
That resonates. That resonates. Kyle, I want to come to you, get your thoughts on that. And then, of course, just a reminder for everyone, please enter questions that you have for Angie Piccioni, Kyle, myself into the chat space. Kyle is screening those questions. He's going to pull those. And as a reminder, given this is our first time doing this, we'd like to hear your voice, your name, where you're from, if Kyle calls on you. If you'd rather not be called on, just put private and Kyle will speak on your behalf. Kyle, your thoughts on this discussion about not just over communicating, but being very purposeful as it relates to aligning to imperatives, as it relates to connecting us as teammates.
And I think I'll hit, because Angie did a good job on hitting on the structure of it. I think the second part in terms of the connecting, a lot of you that are on here, I know, and a lot of the things that I've talked to, it's messy right now, and it's okay for it to be a little messy. We're all working from home. Dogs are barking, kids are coming in. We have a lot of different things that are going on all at the same time. And the human element of having to be okay for it to be a little bit messy, I think is something for the connectedness to be able to be aligned with one another, to be then aligned on the purpose is really important. So that the connection with one another and hitting on the business imperatives with a clear objective of what we want to get to, absolutely. But I think the initial aspect of how people are doing, because sometimes I could see when you're going somewhere, but people's eyes aren't connected because they're distracted by other things that are going on, letting them have a little bit of a forum to have that personal connection, to talk about what it is that's going on, that sometimes turns into laughter because they go, me too. That just, listen to what happened to me yesterday. I think it's a really healthy component of having that connection that we normally don't get in the day-to-day of our work. So allowing that free flow to happen while also obviously walking it down towards the imperative, I think is a very, very big and critical part of the connection aspect.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. I'm going to come back to you and see what questions we have coming in the chat space. I'd like to add, one of the things I've really been advising leaders really at all different levels is to, again, be overt when there's chat, when we're laughing together, is to actually ask the question, hey, fellow teammates, you're going to use different names, of course, but what's the value of this discussion? What's the purpose of what we're doing here as it relates to our work together? It's our job as collaborative leaders to build that awareness. We call it the awareness muscle. It's our jobs to be overt in developing the awareness of our teammates. If we leave it to chance, it's not going to happen at the degree it needs to. Kyle, what do we have for questions?
Look pretty quiet right now. So you guys in the chat section, just ask any questions that you have right now with anything that's going on. Obviously, there's a lot of things that are out there right now in terms of, different videos, what's going on. Everything is coronavirus focused. But in terms of connecting to your individual teams, to the people, what are the biggest headaches that you're finding? Or what are some of the biggest barriers that you're bumping up against as you're trying to work from home, lead a team, and also trying to have the empathy to help people move through this? So any questions that you have, put them in the chat and I'll go through and I'll select some of those out.
Perfect. I've got one for Angie.
Oh, I was, if I may, Craig, just jump on what you just said about culture and how important that is. And I remember a quote, I don't have it specifically, but it was, if we leave culture to chance, then we'll never be able to leverage it for performance, and especially performance in a crisis. And that's why I was saying earlier that if you're not already connected, if you haven't already built that into your culture of caring in your organization, then trying to do that virtually and trying to do that during a crisis, it's almost too late. And so that's why culture is so important, and how you care about people, the things that you think and feel and do when you are together will allow you to leverage that during a crisis. And when you have to go to something like this, which is unprecedented, right? This remote, we're going to be remote for a while.
And so what does that specifically look like in value to our network here of collaborative leaders? What does that specifically look like for those of us that's like, wow, I want to ask this question? For example, I want to ask the question, what are the values of our organization that we have to explicitly model virtually? Maybe that's the right question. The key in asking questions, whether it's in person or virtually, is the platform statement. It's what we say in front of the question to put it into context. And I think the best platform statement is where we say, hey, I think this is the question he's asked. We've never talked about this before. I'm a little uncomfortable saying, be authentic, tell the truth, and simply say, yet our beliefs, I think we need to talk about being explicit in modeling our values here together. Put it into context, ask the question. That sort of courage is going to make the difference. Angie, follow-up question to you. I'm just going to make something up that's a hypothetical, but let's just say that we reside in a country. By the way, we've got over 10 countries represented on this call, and I'm speaking, which is phenomenal. This network of collaborative leaders is broad. It's very humbling to be a part of it. But regardless of what country I live in, I'm just going to make this up. Imagine that there's two different political parties. I'm just making this up. And let's just say that those political those parties don't necessarily see eye to eye. I'm just, again, hypothetical here. What does it look like in a virtual setting to get people who are in conflict with one another to, again, connect and align under crisis? What's going on?
Yeah, well, what an amazing hypothetical you came up with. And of course, moving from private industry and doing the work that I did with Veris for 12 years, and now coming back to public service, because as some of you know, I was in public service just before I came on board with Veris Global. I was reminded about that hypothetical, and I'll tell you this: that usually, and what it's really a delight to see, is that when you are in a crisis, I think some of those labels and some of those shall we say, political differences start to melt away, because we have to do, especially, when we're talking about at the state level, we have to do what's good for the state. And in that case, we have to bring in as much factual data as we can. And when you're talking about the facts, in this case being people who are hospitalized, people who unfortunately are dying, you can't dispute that. There is no political party attached to a death. And so when we see, like in this case, dealing with this crisis, when we see the number of deaths start to accumulate, then we know we have to do something to mitigate or to contain this virus, and then we have everybody's on board. So if the mission is strong enough, then you can have that kind of alignment around how do we achieve this mission, which is to mitigate and reduce and contain the virus.
Angie, I think you're saying something really critical there. If the mission, or shall we say, when the mission is critical enough. And so then our job as collaborative leaders, and again, most of us know in this huddle that the power of co-discover questions triggers people's focus. It mobilizes hearts and minds. And so I'm going to go ahead and give an example of what we could ask in a virtual meeting then, connect people online in a crisis, and then build on it. Could I ask, is our mission and our purpose as a team here strong enough to fully engage each one of us virtually? And if not, what do we need to do to strengthen our clarity of mission, clarity of our imperative? What would you add to that?
Yeah, I think that is critical. And when you talk about mobilizing hearts and minds, that's where it comes in, because it's easy, not easy, but when you have this kind of stark data and this real, factual, we're talking about life or death, that's easy to mobilize some folks in terms of their minds to be able to say, yes, I see the numbers, it's very objective. Yes, we have to do some intervention. But when you can ask the kinds of questions that also mobilize their hearts, then you have, I think, a greater opportunity to have that full engagement. And so we can't just leave it to the raw data. We also have to say, why is this important to you? Why is it important to stay at home? Why is it important to, wear a face mask when you go out? Because, we're talking about your grandparents, we're talking about your parents, we're talking about, so when it gets down to that emotional side as well, if you can do both, then you can mobilize the whole state. And that's what we're doing here in Colorado.
Yeah. In summary, I want to leave this segment by challenging all of us as collaborative leaders, and several of you have been models for me and others at Veris Global. I know you're doing this. I fundamentally believe it's our responsibility as collaborative leaders to ensure that there's mobilization of hearts and minds. As you well know, those folks that struggle with collaborative leadership, they blame teammates for not being engaged. They blame others for lack of engagement, when in reality, as a collaborative leader, regardless of our position, it's our responsibility to step into that. We're going to go to we have two parts that are prepared for our huddles. And the first one is a survey, just an opportunity for all our participants to participate. This is anonymous, of course. Sherilyn's going to put up a survey, and then, of course, we can riff on a little bit in terms of what we're hearing and seeing. Our first survey, barriers. So what are we've got these 5 barriers that we often see that stand between us and our imperative as it relates to getting in the way of collaboration. You have an opportunity to vote for one right now. Select the barrier that is most frequently blocking your successful collaboration.
Perfect. And Craig, while they do that, if I can, now we have all sorts of questions that are hitting the board. So before we move on to that, this one's private, so I will read that. Thank you so much for all the questions. I think you all coordinated and you all hit enter at the same time. So I'm going to do my best to go through all of them. This one is private. On that point of the hypothetical, how do we bridge the gap when one individual or group resists the changes that are necessary to be successful?
I repeat that one more time, Kyle, and then I'm going to go to you, Angie.
All right. So this one here is on the point of the hypothetical in the previous conversation. How do we bridge the gap when one individual or group resists the changes that are necessary to be successful?
All right, Kyle, thank you so much. Angie, let's hear from you.
Yeah, why? Sometimes there is that outlier. There's that one person who it doesn't matter what the facts say. It doesn't matter even what the emotions might drum up. They may be resistant because of a point of view or because of a past experience. And so I think it's really important to connect with that person one-on-one and then once again, to try to find out what is their motivation, what is driving them to either hold firm to a position and not let go for the co-laboring, the collaboration part of that, or maybe there was an experience that they had, whether it was with the company or in their personal life. And so I think that's where we have to leverage our personal relationship with the people that we work with and the people that we lead. And so we that might not be something that we can do on Zoom with the whole team there. And so acknowledging it and validating that person, I think, is critical to say, I understand that you have a different perspective on this. Let's talk about what the group perspective is, or let's move forward and come back to that. But I think it has to be on a one-to-one eventually.
All right, Kyle, your thoughts on that? I've got a couple steps I can offer, but I'd love to know your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, my brief thoughts on that. I think every single person wants to grow and they want to have success. I think that's just an innate human trait. I think when people blockade us being their teammates, it's out of a natural default of fear. I think it's coming out of fear. And they don't want to move forward because there's something there that's impeding that progress for them. And I think we talk a lot about the energy map, and being on the backside of the energy map. And I think allowing that person and really asking those co-discovery questions and getting to the root of why they're impeding progress, it helps, because I think they need to have that come to the surface first, so then you can identify what that is, give shape and form to whatever that impediment is, being fear, before they can start to move forward and wanting to engage in a more fruitful, positive way to move forward. But I think it's a misnomer that there's individuals that are just innately wanting to stay rooted and rocked in an unhealthy place. But I think they don't know how to get themselves out of it. And as leaders, that's really, it's a hard job, but it's something that we can do, I think, in a way where we have very vulnerable, very raw, open conversations where we've been there ourselves to help them move forward.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to summarize our comments in really three things. I think we're spot on. So as collaborative leaders, we can leave this huddle and actually go after this. Number one, remembering that actually everybody wants to be great. Everybody wants to be a part of something successful. We actually, in the end, most of us want the same thing. So thank you for that reminder. Number two, connect and build that relationship. And that's going to be one-on-one. It's reaching out, having a virtual coffee. I'm really impressed with the number of collaborative leaders that we're hearing that are making it a very, very tactical and important part of their day, that they're having virtual coffees with key stakeholders and influencers. Number three, again, summarizing our comments here, I think it's really critical, is understanding, hey, what do you ultimately want to accomplish here? I think it's important for us to remind ourselves that publicly, most people don't like to be wrong. And if they become entrenched in an idea that's not consistent or aligned with teammates, there's a lot at stake. And so we as collaborative leaders, whether we have positional authority or not, we need to reach out to them and give them the confidence that we're together. Give them the confidence that this is not about right or wrong, it's a process of discovery. And their voice matters. And then simply asking that question, what is ultimately more important for us collectively right now? And of course, most people are going to say that we move together with an action item. 3 points there. Really appreciate that question that just came in. Cheryl Lynn, can we share the results of our poll? They're in front of us here. And so over-reliance on consensus decision-making, that one we see a lot. These, of course, barriers are identified and posted on our website at verisglobal.com as well. These are the 5 most common ones we see. By the way, quick side note, if there's a barrier to collaboration that's not listed here, please send it as a chat to Kyle, because this is the data that we're constantly collecting. Angie, your thought, what do you do in a situation when we've got a team, virtually again, that has this over-reliance on, everybody has to agree for us to be aligned? 2 different things, but it's oftentimes confused.
Yeah, thank you. And in our department, of course, we have different divisions within the department, as all of you do in your business. And so I do rely on my chiefs, the chiefs of each of those divisions, to do some of that groundwork prior to us coming together as a team. So working through some of those barriers that we had there with their division, and then with our cross-functional, if you will, partnerships. And so we have a lot, I have to say, we do a lot of convening, we have a lot of meetings, I didn't realize how many meetings there were necessary. So I'm looking at some of those faces like Trisha and folks that I know that oh my goodness, we have so many meetings. And so it's during those meetings where you have to build that kind of connectedness and that kind of collaboration. And so that people understand that sometimes their ideas rise to the top and sometimes they don't. And so when we think about consensus doesn't mean all. It means, for us, it means, do we have the confidence, like you said, to move this forward with everybody on board, but not necessarily every single individual has to say yes. And so it's, does your division, does your team, does this cross-functional team, is this the decision that we can move forward? So it's a tough one. It's tougher in real life than I thought it was when I was helping you guys with that. And so being able to move the group forward as opposed to moving every individual forward.
Terrific. I'm gonna add one more question that has been proven to work in this situation. Then Kyle, we're gonna come to you and find out another question. Utilize a question from our participants here. I think it's really critical to ask the question of teammates, again, whether we have the positional authority or not, is to say, what does it look like for us each to own the decision we make here, even though we don't necessarily agree with the decision?
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like for us to each own this decision as we move forward, even though we might not agree with the decision entirely? And that's not a rhetorical question.
Yeah.
My recommendation to leaders, and by the way, where do I get these recommendations? Seeing the best collaborative leaders in action. It's not like I'm just cooking this up in isolation. And ensuring that people are actually answering that so we can, of course, give feedback later. All right, Kyle, participant question.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm gonna merge some together and go through these as best as I can. So if I miss you, please, I'm so sorry. So Hector, I'm gonna read yours and then I'm gonna go to Misty because they were both very, very closely intertwined. So Hector asked, I feel that I'm having more video calls than ever, so struggling to find a balance between being connected to my team and then also being productive. So the balance, finding that balance between being connected to my team and also being productive. And then I'm gonna flip over to Misty because it was really similar, Misty. So I'm gonna unmute you real quick. And then if you'd ask your question and maybe we could just merge those together and address them. And it maybe, if you would do that for us, Angie, if you'd wanna take point on that first one. So Misty, what was your question?
So it has to do with the ups and downs I'm experiencing every week. And I've noticed with my teammates as well that, you know, I can't even actually predict it. For a while there, it seemed like Wednesday was the day. You know? Hump day seemed to be taking it out of me. But, you know, sometimes it's going into Monday now that we've done this for 4 or 5 weeks. And so my curiosity is strategies for the long haul that we're in. You know, it's not next week we're going back to work and we don't know exactly when. And I've been so pleased and impressed with my teammates that they're rising to these challenges. And I know when I speak with them privately and I'll own it for myself, it's not easy. And so we're connecting a lot. I mean, I think we're getting an A+ on connection and it's a personal struggle. So anyway, just thoughts on strategies for the long haul.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Thanks, Kyle, and thanks, Misty and Hector. I understand this. We just had this conversation with my team. I have 75 people on my team, and one of the consensus feelings is that all days seem to merge together. Because we're working from home and we're not separating and going off to an office and coming back to our home, it's like our home and our work have really been integrated, and that's not always a good thing. So Saturday morning is no different for some people than Wednesday morning because it's still, you know, you're getting up and you're not going anywhere. And worse off is that for most of us, and I'm not sure how it is in your states, but you know, our K-12 schools are also closed, and so we do have a policy where we have some folks who work from home maybe 1 day a week, and on that day that they work from home, their kids are at school. But now they're working from home every day, and their kids are there as well, and there's no separation. And so there are plenty of tips that are out there. LinkedIn or on Facebook, lots of tips about how to work remotely. And some of the key things are to make sure that you have a separate space that can be as undistracted as possible, that you take your breaks, that you have a stop time for sure, and that you manage your workflow. So, I have to say, I have been in front of this laptop too many days from 7:30 in the morning to 7:30 at night with maybe even only a 15-minute break. And that's not good. It's not healthy. And so managing that workflow, Hector, I think is one thing about being connected. I will say this last thing is that most of my team said that they feel way more productive, partly because in our office, we have a culture of interruption where we walk down the hall and we interrupt because we have an issue, and so we have this culture of interruption. So it's actually easier for them to be more productive because they can stay more focused. The problem is, how do you break up that workflow? And that is important for our mental and physical health for the long haul, Misty. Yeah.
I would this is really a critical one. And this is where the three challenges we're facing, being separated from one another, the economy is going to change business models and strategies. I mean, it's going to have a huge impact, especially we're on strategies. And of course, the fact that this is global. I'm going to recommend that as collaborative leaders. Well, first, collaborative leadership begins where a lot of typical leadership ends. And then what I'm talking about is typical leadership. You got strategy, you got process, systems, structure, role clarity. And it's after that that collaborative leadership begins, and that's the interpersonal development. And so consider that we're, I'm going to use a metaphor here, athletic trainers. And by the way, I've never been one. I only read about them. But what I understand about the best athletic trainers is they know all their clients, and they make sure that their client has a plan for Hector for being productive, and for Misty taking care of their emotional health, their well-being. And I actually, it's been priority number one for me at Veris Global to make sure each one of our employees and their families is working a plan, is healthy, and has that, Maslow's base security in place. And so that's why I would simply add and integrate into this discussion is collaborative leaders. If we're not ensuring they have that productivity, emotional health plan, we're going to be at risk.
Yeah, and we're fortunate that we do have jobs, I will say, because I know in Colorado we had, 250,000 people have signed up for unemployment insurance. And so, Colorado is relatively a small population state, but that's a whole lot of people. And so, so when you talk about Maslow's hierarchy, there are a lot of people, our neighbors, who, and perhaps relatives or friends of our who don't right now.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. Kyle, let's come back to you. We've got a number of these questions is exactly what we wanted to accomplish. Additional questions, and Kyle, by the way, you jump in. You're brilliant. Additional insights on anything we're discussing here.
Yeah, I want to circle back on Hector because he asked a fantastic question. A or B, and I think that second part of it was, and how do I still be productive? Hector, I know you and I know your organization. Right now, I believe doing that, connecting with your team, it is productive. And I think sometimes we forget that. We go, if I do all these things, then I'm productive, but then I also need to be there on an emotional level for my team. But right now, the best leaders understand too. And that's what I love about you is you're such a great leader that you're hard on yourself because you want to do so much. But at this time, that's what your team needs. And that is extremely productive. So I think sometimes we forget that is a really productive thing. So I just wanted to circle back on that. And then I wanted to come over Raymond Denzel, I believe is how I would pronounce that. You had a really good question. So I'm going to unmute you real quick. And would you ask your question for the challenge that you see? All right, you want to ask that for us real quick? There you go, you should be unmuted.
Yeah, I guess the question, we were talking a little bit about, when we have consensus and how do you get the team to kind of be fully engaged as you move forward in these events, and especially now when a lot of team members are looking at each other to kind of gauge the level of engagement when you're in a room, but now we're all virtual, and how do you tell when somebody's silent? So I know there's a lot of chat going on in the background on a lot of these things, but I think it really boils down to the level of trust that the team members have with each other, and that no matter what goes on, even if you're not all in on the answer, you're all in with the team. So maybe you're not fully vested in what you think the solution is, but you know that everyone else in the team has your back, and you're going to be all in with them as a team. And I think the teams always accomplish more because of building those trust levels. I know I've seen it in the past where you have I open up conversations to have, hey, what do you guys think we could do around a situation? Everyone throws out a bunch of ideas, and then I kind of say, in the end, we're going to pick one, and we all have to agree to support that one. And as long as we're all in and trust each other, we tend to accomplish those goals without even, everyone being in alignment. So I think the key thing I find is, making sure the team has trust in each other. And I'm wondering if others have the same, experiences.
You got it. You got it, Angie. Let's take that one on.
Yeah, I think what you have just described is one of the Veris Global tools called the 3 conditions that accelerate change. That is precisely why it's so important that we take care of that first condition, that people feel good about themselves. They feel good about themselves in this workspace and with these work people. And so again, that's one of those conditions that you cannot try to build in the moment of the decision making or in the moment of the crisis. That has to be part of the culture, that in your culture, people feel good about themselves and they feel good about the people that they work with and the culture that's established. Then we can say, when we're ready to need a decision or make a change, what are your ideas about that? And why is that important to you? Or so that we tap into both their ideas and their motivation. So the 3 conditions you've just described, Raymond, so I'm sure you've come through one of the programs with that tool. Otherwise, you're brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
He's brilliant. I know,
Yes.
Ray, he's brilliant. I'd like to add a couple of things that I think are also useful. And I'm going to build on Raymond's the topic of trust. If we trust each other, I want to encourage, I strongly believe in this. If we have 8 people in a meeting and there's a particular topic that is not relevant, hypothetically, one item on the agenda that's not relevant to everybody, but yet we're going to move to another item where we do need everybody. I think because we trust each other, Ray, let's give those 3 or 4 people that's not relevant to, give them permission to multitask. Because right now there's a lot in virtual settings where people have to pretend they're present, and then they're secretly multitasking because the agenda item wasn't super relevant to them. And it's this game, and then they go on mute, and I'm sorry, I didn't know I was on mute. Well, you really did, and blah, blah, blah. Well, if we trust each other, just say on this particular topic, it's the 4 of us, the other 3, you guys go ahead and multitask, and when we're ready to move on, we need you with us, and then we'll announce that, and then we're gonna bring everybody in. The other little tip I'd offer is, let's just all agree, because we trust each other, let's declare up front that if you have to do something else, if you have to step away, if the dogs are barking, if someone's at your door, which we shouldn't be because we're social distancing, but it's a bad example, you get the idea. But let's just declare that if you're going to step away, right? And so there's a signal that says, so we have that trust, let's be authentic with each other, and quit some of these engagement games, if you will. I don't know if that's useful, but I wanted to add it. We're rocking and rolling, Kyle. Let's hear another one, bud.
Another question, Tracy Phillips question. So question is this: coming from an environment that always tries to overachieve, how should expectations be adjusted?
Wow. This is wow. Thanks, Tracy. Happy to have you on there. Wow, it's a tough one. It's a tough one for me, I will admit, because it's important that every department in the state government, that we are continuing to move our objectives forwards and execute on our, we call them the WIGs, our wildly important goals. And in fact, I have a meeting today with the governor and his chief of staff to talk about our progress on our WIGs. And so for me, I'm a little bit hyper vigilant around making sure that we are still achieving, and maybe I got that from so many years of working with you guys at P&G, Tracy. So that's a tough one for me. So I'd love to hear from some of, from Craig. I'd love to hear from you. How do you balance that, that need to overachieve or to make sure, especially as a leader, to make sure your team is executing on its goals and its strategies when you can't walk around the office and check, not really check in, but just to see, you know, what's happening. Oh.
That's really key. Kyle, I'm going to let you respond first. I've got a thought as well.
I think that comes largely with clarity. You know, really, what is the imperative of the organization and what is the imperative of the team right now? Mm-hmm. And is that aligned with what's best for all of us? Because I think, and we talk about this a lot, there's a human imperative, right? And there's a business imperative. Like, how are our people? How's our culture and how are our values? But then also we have to deliver on our business imperative. The business has to make money or it's no longer a business. We still have to do these certain things. And overachievement is fantastic. I think when they're all the variables are where they're supposed to be, of course, we're always trying to overachieve. At this time, if our imperative is to be able to reach a certain goal, is to build culture and to do what's most important for us now, I think the clarity of what that really is at this moment, it's not about overachieving anymore. It's about, if we hit this for us, that's going to be overachieving, just reaching that goal, because this is what's important right now in this environment.
Yeah, I concur. I would just, I would add what we're hearing is that there is over communication, which is important in a virtual setting and during a crisis. Yet, how do we make sure that the communication doesn't make more noise for our teammates? And so what Kyle's demonstrating here and what we've been modeling through these brief minutes together is being very purposeful. And in Kyle's example there, what's our imperative in this meeting? Getting greater shared reality around what does success look like and what does failure look like? And at the heart of your question, Tracy, I don't know you personally, I know Angie does and others, but I got to tell you, at the heart of it is you're caring for others, because nobody wants a teammate to feel like they're a failure during this time. And so using Kyle's method of creating clarity, creating shared reality in that definition. Yeah. Angie, if you have additional point, and then we'll go to our wrap up.
Yeah, definitely. And I think part of that is also right now, there's a heightened reliance on autonomy, right? Everyone has to be able to know what they have to do. That's where that clarity comes in, like Kyle said. And also we have to trust that they are doing the thing that they know they need to do. And so that I've been with the governor's office now for just over a year and about 4 months. And so for most of my team, virtually for all of my team, I know that they're credible. I know that they're reliable. And so now it's that autonomy and letting them drive their workflow. And fortunately, we're in such good communication that I do know that things are moving forward and things are happening. So it gives me some relief that when I have my meeting today, that I'll be able to report all of the good things that have been continuing, even in the midst of this crisis and this remote working. So.
Terrific. Excellent. In a moment, we're going to come back to Kyle, Angie, myself, and we'll share our insight in an instant here, what we got as the energy and the inspiration from this huddle with you. I would like to make sure that everyone's aware of our additional resources, things that are available to you. And this, of course, is just the tip of the iceberg. But when you think about the discussion we've had here, we want to continue it. You heard several references to the tools that are very common within Verus Global. Even if you have not been a part of a Verus Global program, there are resources available to you. Do Big Things, of course, co-authored with Angie Piccioni, myself, and Victoria Roberts. That's there, available anywhere you like to buy it, purchase your books. Connected Focus Videocast, very excited and actually humbled by the amazing response. Those are 5-minute videos that really take these sorts of ideas and allow us to create that shared reality with our teams. That's at connectedfocus.com. Those come out every week. And of course, we'd love to have you join the discussion within LinkedIn, Verus Global LinkedIn community there. All right, by the way, our next Collaborative Leader Huddle is 2 weeks from now, April 23rd, 8 a.m., Colorado Rocky Mountain time. Going to have another special guest. Angie, sorry you can't join us every single time. But we'll be rotating in the inspired guests. Angie set a high bar, and so I hope everyone will join us and be a part of that. I'd like to ask you, because you're part of this inaugural huddle, as we wrap things up, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What worked for you? What would you like even more of in future huddles? Again, we have very, very purposeful in ensuring this is not just another webinar experience, sit and get. We want it to be both inspirational, energizing, and of course, practical, things we can walk away and do to connect people to purpose, one another, and our values. Kyle, let's start with you. Your insight and incident, what was most valuable for you during our huddle?
That there's so many questions that hit that I feel like I failed you all by not getting to all of them. So I'm so sorry for that. I'm going to do my best after this to answer all of these the best way that I can. But the insight is that there's so many leaders that are on this call, and the questions are all filled with empathy. How do I serve better? How do I connect my team more? How do I help somebody that might be in that place of fear or that's impeding a certain thing? Help them feel more inclusive. How do I engage more now that we're virtually? Every single question that I've seen, it's just amazing to see how much everybody on this call is a leader. Nothing is about how do I do. It's all about how do I engage others and connect others to our mission? How do I reset and realign expectations during this time? So just a massive amount of respect for everybody that's on the call, because all those questions just show that you're in the position that you are for a reason. So that was my biggest insight.
Terrific. Thank you, Kyle. Angie Piccioni.
Great. Yeah, I think for me, it's how important it is to build a culture of caring, of productivity, of trust. The culture, and it went back to, was it Peter Decker who said that culture eats strategy for breakfast? But it's so true, because now that we're remote, now that we are in crisis, we can leverage the culture. We are able to succeed because of the culture that we have built. And so when we think about the team activation checklist, those 5 things to make a great team, I'm relying on those so much now that we're in this crisis kind of a situation. So build your culture, and it will sustain you through any changes that come.
Excellent. Thank you, Angie. And Angie, thank you for being our first guest. We'll look forward to having you in future huddles, I'm sure. Thank you for your important work, both at the state level and the world level. We know how you roll. Insight in an instant for me. Thank you, everybody. This huddle gave me further proof that the heart of collaborative leadership is this understanding that we don't have to be the solo hero, that collectively, the insights, the wisdom, and connecting people to purpose, one another, and values, we all have it. And together, it's even more powerful. I saw evidence of that. It's very, very exciting for me. Thank you for an inspired huddle. We'll look forward to seeing you in our next huddle. And remember, leadership matters, but only teams deliver. Thank you, everyone. Be healthy, be safe.